Most night drives are forgettable. This one wasn't. Nothing happened at first. No warning. No sound. Just a moment that shouldn't have stayed in memory. But did. These are 3 drives people still think about, long after they reached home. I'm telling this the way my friend told it to me. Not all at once. Just the parts she can't forget. That night, she had an argument with her boyfriend and decided to leave. Nothing loud. Nothing dramatic. Just the moment when staying felt like the wrong choice. It was late. After midnight. The street outside his apartment was quiet and nearly empty. She didn't book a ride. Her phone battery was low, and she wanted to leave immediately. A car slowed down as she stepped off the curb. Plain sedan. No markings. Nothing that stood out. She got in the back seat and gave her address. The driver acknowledged it without turning around. At first, the ride felt normal. The car moved steadily. The radio played softly. A few minutes passed. Then a few more. Long enough for her to notice something was off. She knew the route, and the street they were on wasn't part of it. She leaned forward slightly and said, calmly, "I think this isn't the right way." The driver didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I know." The car turned again. The area changed. Warehouses. Empty parking lots. No pedestrians. No traffic. The radio went silent. She repeated the address more firmly. "This way's faster," he said. She asked him to stop the car. He didn't. She noticed the doors were locked. The indicator on the door panel was already on. He looked at her in the rear-view mirror, held her gaze. "Don't touch that," he said. "Just sit back." The road narrowed. No side streets. No lights ahead. Then the car slowed. It didn't stop immediately. It rolled forward for a few seconds, longer than it should have. Finally, it stopped. The engine stayed on. He reached into his jacket pocket. Slowly. She froze. He pulled something out and turned around in his seat. It wasn't a weapon. It was a phone. The screen was already on. Recording. He held it up, pointing it directly at her. "Say your address again," he said. She didn't answer. Out loud, he added, just like before. She told him she wanted to leave. She said she didn't agree to this. He didn't react. "Say it," he said calmly. "The whole thing." Her voice shook as she repeated her address. He adjusted the angle of the phone. "Good," he said. "Now say, 'Please stop the car.'" She hesitated. "Say it," he repeated. Exactly like that. She did. Her voice sounded unfamiliar to her own ears. He smiled slightly. Not at her. At the screen. "Everyone sounds different right here," he said. "Like they're not sure who's listening." She screamed. The sound filled the car, sharp and uncontrolled. He didn't flinch. Didn't move the phone away. "This part is important," he said. "Try not to turn your head." She slammed her shoulder into the door. Once. Then again. The car rocked. And suddenly, the engine shut off. The doors unlocked. She didn't wait to understand why. She ran. She didn't look back. Didn't check if the car followed. She ran until she reached a road with lights. Until there were other people around. She never saw the car again. She never reported it. There was no plate number. No record. Nothing solid to describe. Nothing technically happened. But sometimes she wonders how many videos are on that phone. How many women were asked to say the same words, in the same order, and how many of them didn't get to run. Because one thing is clear to her now. He didn't want silence. He wanted proof that they were scared. Night driving never scared me. It's repetitive, predictable, until one drive broke that expectation so cleanly that I noticed it almost immediately. Nothing dramatic happened at first. No sound, no warning. Just a car that entered my mirrors and refused to leave them. This happened just a few weeks ago. I was driving home after visiting a friend across state lines. I left close to midnight. By the time I reached the forest stretch of the highway, traffic had thinned out completely. No houses, no businesses, only reflectors, asphalt, and trees pressing in on both sides. I checked my mirrors out of habit. The road behind me was empty. 20 minutes later, that changed. A pair of headlights appeared behind me. Far back, low, not aggressive, not drifting, just present. I waited for the distance to close. It didn't. I waited for the car to fall behind. It didn't do that either. The spacing stayed exact, as if measured. Then the distance changed. Without warning, the headlights surged forward. Not gradually, instantly. They filled my mirrors so completely that I lost the edges of the road behind me. I felt my body tense before my mind caught up. The car was too close. Close enough that if I tapped the brakes, even slightly, there wouldn't be time to react. It stayed there, not swerving, not flashing its lights, just pressing forward as if testing how much space I was willing to give it. For a moment, I was certain it wasn't trying to pass me. It felt like it was waiting for impact. I eased my foot off the accelerator. The headlights stayed locked in place, close enough that the interior of my car reflected their glare. Then, just as suddenly, the distance reset. back to the exact spacing it had kept before. As if that surge forward had never happened. I changed lanes, expecting a pass. The headlights moved with me, maintaining the same alignment. I stopped checking the mirror constantly and fixed my eyes on the road ahead. The white lines began to blur together, repeating in a rhythm that made time feel stretched. I adjusted my speed slightly, not enough to be obvious, just enough to register a difference. The headlights adjusted with me. No hesitation, no delay. The radio, which had been playing quietly for most of the drive, cut out mid-sentence. Not static, just silence. That's when I realized I hadn't seen another vehicle in a long time. Long enough that the presence behind me no longer made sense. I glanced at my phone. The screen lit up, then stalled. No notifications. No loading icons. Just an unresponsive glow. A heavy, unfamiliar pressure settled in my chest. Not panic. Something slower. More deliberate. I decided to leave the highway. The next exit led to a narrow local road. Poor lighting. No shoulder. The kind of road designed to take you somewhere specific, not through. I took it. The headlights followed. The road curved tightly through the trees. My high beams barely reached, past the next turn. The car behind me stayed just out of view, but never out of awareness. Then, without warning, the headlights disappeared. Not dimmed. Gone. The road behind me turned into a black void. I slowed instinctively, scanning the mirrors, the edges of the road, the tree line. Nothing. The absence felt worse than the presence. My phone vibrated once in my hand. The screen lit up, then went dark again. A rest stop appeared ahead, sudden and bright, against the darkness. Trucks idling, lights buzzing overhead. I pulled in and stopped hard. I got out of the car immediately and turned back toward the road. There were no headlights, no engine noise, no sign that anything had ever been there. I stayed in that parking lot until the sky began to lighten. Later, when I told someone about it, I didn't expect a reaction, but they recognized the location immediately. That stretch of highway had come up before. Different drivers, different nights, same pattern. A vehicle that never passes, never falls back, and disappears the moment you reach somewhere populated. No descriptions ever match, and no one reports seeing a driver. I've known Mark since college. He's the kind of guy who narrates his own grocery shopping like it's a sitcom. Nothing rattles him. So when he stopped mid-sentence one night, just stopped talking, I knew whatever he was about to say wasn't a joke. This was years ago, back when he drove a taxi between jobs. Night shifts. Mostly drunks, airport runs, people crying quietly in the back seat. Nothing unusual. Until one passenger. Mark told me it was just after 2 a.m. Late enough that the city felt hollow, but not late enough to feel asleep. He was parked near a closed diner when the man got in. No door slam. No greeting. Just the soft weight of someone settling into the back seat. Mark said that was the first thing that felt off. Most people announce themselves without meaning to. A cough. A sigh. Something. This guy didn't. The man gave an address a few blocks away. Normal enough. Mark pulled out. About a minute into the drive, the man leaned forward. Not aggressively. Not close. Just enough for Mark to see his reflection in the rearview mirror. And then he changed the destination. Actually, can you take me to Riverside instead? Mark shrugged and adjusted the route. It happens. People change their minds. But then it happened again. 2 minutes later. Different street. Opposite direction. Then again. Each time, the man waited until they were already moving, already committed, before correcting himself. Mark laughed it off at first. Made a joke about indecisive nights. The man didn't respond. That was when Mark noticed something else. The man wasn't looking out the window. He wasn't looking at his phone. He was staring straight ahead. At the road. At Mark's hands on the steering wheel. At the space between them reflected in the mirror. Mark said it felt like being watched, without being looked at. The fourth destination change came with instructions. Slow down here. Miss that turn. No, the next one. Mark asked where exactly he was trying to go. The man hesitated. Just long enough to feel deliberate. Then he gave another address. Mark didn't recognize it. They were far from downtown now. Streetlights thinning. Houses sitting farther apart. That quiet stretch where the city stops pretending to be friendly. That's when the man asked a question. How long have you been driving tonight? Mark answered automatically, then immediately wished he hadn't. How many passengers before me? Another pause. Mark didn't answer this one. The man nodded, like that told him something. Then he said, very calmly, "You can stop here." They weren't at any address. Just a stretch of road between trees. No houses. No sidewalks. Mark told him he couldn't stop there. Company policy. The man smiled. Not wide. Not friendly. Just enough to change his face. That's okay, he said. I won't be getting out. Mark laughed. A nervous reflex. Asked him what he meant. The man leaned back into the seat and finally looked out the window. People usually don't notice, he said, because they're busy watching the mirror. Mark's hands tightened on the wheel. He asked if the man was threatening him. The man shook his head. No, he said. I'm telling you. Then he gave one last destination. Mark recognized it immediately. It was his own apartment complex. Mark pulled over at the nearest gas station. Lights. People. Cameras. He told the man the ride was over, that he was calling dispatch. The man didn't argue, didn't rush, just reached into his coat. Mark's heart jumped, but the man only placed something gently on the seat, a folded receipt. Then he opened the door and stepped out. No rush, no backwards glance, just gone. Mark waited before touching the receipt. Something about it felt wrong to hold, like it didn't belong in the car. The date caught his eye first. 3 weeks earlier. Same taxi number. Same shift. Same stretch of city. Mark checked his own calendar. That night, he remembered it. Because he hadn't worked. He'd called in sick. The next morning, he went to the garage. Asked the night supervisor if anyone else had driven his cab that week. The answer came too quickly. No. Mark showed him the receipt. The supervisor stared at it longer than he should have. Then said, "That car was logged as stationary all night. No mileage. No engine start. No driver assigned." Mark asked who printed the receipt. The supervisor shook his head. "Those print automatically when a ride ends." Mark went home and pulled out an old box. Inside were his shift reports, handwritten notes he used to keep for himself. Addresses, times, small details. He compared them to the destinations the man had changed during the ride. They lined up. Not places Mark had driven to, but places he had stopped, late at night, with the engine running. While dispatch thought he was moving, Mark realized something then. The passenger never chose random locations. He chose moments. Moments when Mark had been alone, tired, distracted, unaccounted for. Mark quit 2 days later. No explanation. Just gone. Years passed before he told me the last part. He'd found an old news article, buried online. No photos. Just a short paragraph. A man arrested for posing as a passenger to test drivers' routines, learning their habits, their blind spots, their stops. He was linked to multiple disappearances, but never charged. Lack of evidence. The man's name meant nothing to Mark, but the description did. The narrow smile. The way he watched reflections instead of faces. The article mentioned one detail. Something the man always did before leaving a car. He'd leave a receipt behind, dated wrong, on purpose. Mark still keeps his mirrors angled slightly down, not because he's afraid of seeing someone, but because he's afraid of recognizing himself, the version that didn't notice when he was being studied. Some details don't fade. They wait. If this story held your attention, there are more like it here. Slow, quiet, precise. Subscribe if you want to keep finding them. And don't ignore the road when it feels slightly off.